A routine dental clean, a minor skin nick, a brief moment of bacteremia. For most people, it's nothing. But for a heart with a hidden vulnerability, it is the start of a silent, destructive siege. Bacteria anchor, multiply, and construct an impenetrable fortress of fibrin and platelets right on the heart valves. It's called infective endocarditis. Left undetected, it doesn't just damage the heart, it breaks off pieces, sending septic emboli straight to the brain. Here is how it hides and how you catch it.
This video provides an overview of infective endocarditis, covering key topics including the introduction, prophylaxis, diagnosis, medical management, indications for surgery, and potential complications.
Case Study 1. The Hidden Source. A 34-year-old male presents to the ER with a sudden spiking fever, 39.2 degrees Celsius, severe chills, and a new, harsh holosystolic murmur loudest at the apex. The clue? Examination reveals tiny, painless erythematous macules on his palms, Janeway lesions, and splinter hemorrhages under his fingernails. He admits to occasional recreational IV drug use. The diagnosis? Acute Staphylococcus aureus endocarditis, targeting the tricuspid valve. The takeaway? In acute presentations, S. aureus can aggressively destroy completely normal, healthy valves, demanding immediate blood cultures and empiric IV antibiotics. We begin with an introduction to infective endocarditis. This condition, which affects heart valves and cardiovascular devices, carries significant risks of morbidity and mortality. Given its often complex nature, a multidisciplinary approach to management is essential.
Historically known as malignant endocarditis, the disease was notably described by William Osler in the late 19th century. Understanding its history helps us appreciate how our clinical approach has evolved. In terms of epidemiology, infective endocarditis involves infection of the endocardial surface, typically the heart valves. It remains a serious condition, with an incidence of about 13.8 cases per 100,000 people annually, and a notable mortality rate. Research on endocarditis in Africa highlights that rheumatic heart disease is a leading risk factor in adults, while congenital heart disease is more common in children. The study also notes high rates of complications, such as heart failure and acute kidney injury. The EuroEndo Registry study provides broad prospective data on thousands of patients. It reveals that the majority of cases are community-acquired, though healthcare-associated cases are a significant concern, often involving staphylococcal infections. Long-term data from Europe shows shifts in epidemiological trends. Over 2 decades, we have seen changes in the prevalence of native versus prosthetic valve endocarditis, as well as an increase in device-related infections. The pathogenesis of infective endocarditis typically begins with endothelial damage, followed by the formation of platelet fibrin thrombi, which then allows for microorganism adherence and the development of local vegetation. Risk factors are broadly divided into cardiac and non-cardiac categories. Cardiac factors include previous endocarditis or valve disease, while non-cardiac factors range from the use of central venous catheters to hemodialysis. For patients with cardiovascular implantable electronic devices, specific risk factors exist, including procedure duration, hematoma formation, and even operator experience, all of which can increase the likelihood of device-related infection. The microbiology of endocarditis varies depending on whether the infection is community-acquired, nosocomial, or related to drug use. Staphylococcus aureus remains one of the most frequently identified pathogens across many of these groups. Data from large cohorts shows a spectrum of infectious agents. While staphylococci and streptococci are dominant, the presence of culture-negative endocarditis continues to be a diagnostic challenge in about 10% of cases. Culture-negative endocarditis often occurs due to prior antibiotic use or because the pathogens are slow-growing or fastidious. Advanced testing, such as serology and PCR assays, plays a critical role in identifying these elusive organisms. Prevention of infective endocarditis is paramount. While some cases are linked to invasive or dental procedures, a large portion of risk is manageable through patient education and hygiene. Key preventative strategies include maintaining excellent dental and skin hygiene, being mindful of persistent fevers, avoiding unnecessary antibiotic self-prescription, and communicating risk status to healthcare providers before any medical intervention. Antibiotic prophylaxis is recommended for patients with a history of infective endocarditis, those with prosthetic cardiac valves, or those with certain congenital heart diseases. These measures are critical for high-risk patients undergoing specific dental or surgical procedures. Regarding procedure-based prophylaxis, it is strictly recommended for dental extractions and oral surgeries involving manipulation of the gingival or periapical tissues. For other invasive procedures, decisions are made on a case-by-case basis, particularly for high-risk patients. When prophylaxis is indicated, a single dose of an antibiotic, most commonly amoxicillin, is administered 30 to 60 minutes before the procedure. Alternatives are available for patients with allergies to penicillin or ampicillin. In the context of cardiac procedures, preventative measures go beyond antibiotics. This includes preoperative screening for Staphylococcus aureus, careful aseptic technique during device implantation, and minimizing the duration of invasive catheterization. Moving to the diagnosis of infective endocarditis, we rely on a combination of clinical, microbiological, and imaging findings to establish a definitive diagnosis. The disease is systemic and can involve various organs. Complications may arise from embolization, leading to findings in the spleen, kidneys, brain, or lungs, which further complicates the clinical presentation. Clinical manifestations are often nonspecific, including fever, night sweats, and fatigue. However, clinicians should watch for classic signs such as Janeway lesions, Osler nodes, and Roth spots, which, while less common today, remain hallmark diagnostic clues. Physical examination may reveal new heart murmurs, splenomegaly, or signs of heart failure. These findings, when paired with constitutional symptoms, necessitate urgent evaluation for potential endocarditis. Diagnostic imaging plays a pivotal role. Echocardiography, both transthoracic and transesophageal, is essential for visualizing vegetations, abscesses, or valve destruction, which are critical components of the diagnostic criteria. Advanced imaging modalities such as cardiac CT and PET-CT are increasingly utilized. These tools are especially valuable for evaluating prosthetic valve endocarditis or detecting emboli that might be missed by conventional ultrasound. The clinical criteria for diagnosis have evolved over decades, from the original Duke criteria in 1994 to the latest 2023 Duke ISCID guidelines, which aim to improve sensitivity and incorporate modern diagnostic capabilities. The 2023 Duke ISCID criteria introduced several updates. These include expanded microbiology diagnostics, new imaging interpretations, a new surgical major criterion category, and a refined list of predisposing conditions. Definite endocarditis can now be established through pathologic criteria obtained via surgery or autopsy, or through rigorous clinical criteria involving major and minor markers.
Case Study 2. The Dental Delay. Subacute Presentation. A 68-year-old female with a known history of mitral valve prolapse presents with a 6-week history of low-grade night sweats, profound fatigue, and a 10-pound weight loss. She was recently treated for flu-like symptoms by her GP. The clue: she mentions having an extensive dental extraction 2 months ago without antibiotic prophylaxis. Fundoscopic exam reveals Roth spots, retinal hemorrhages with pale centers. The diagnosis: subacute endocarditis caused by viridans group streptococci. The takeaway: subacute endocarditis mimics general malaise and chronic fatigue. Always maintain a high index of suspicion if there is a history of structural heart disease and recent mucosal disruption.
The clinical diagnosis is classified as definite, possible, or rejected. This structured approach helps clinicians make confident decisions regarding treatment duration and the necessity for surgical intervention. In summary, the updated Duke ISCID criteria provide a comprehensive framework. By integrating traditional clinical assessments with newer imaging and laboratory methods, we can achieve earlier and more accurate diagnoses for our patients. The 2023 Duke ISCID criteria serve as the gold standard for clinical diagnosis. This framework provides essential guidelines for identifying infective endocarditis through a systematic evaluation of clinical, microbiological, and imaging findings. For patients with suspected infective endocarditis, the diagnostic algorithm begins with blood cultures. Early and proper collection of multiple sets is vital to ensure the accurate identification of the causative pathogen. Imaging is the next critical pillar in the diagnostic algorithm. We utilize various modalities to visualize the heart, identify vegetation, and assess the structural integrity of the valves and surrounding tissues. Advanced imaging in endocarditis provides deeper insights. Beyond basic assessment, we use these tools to detect complications such as abscesses, pseudoaneurysms, and embolic events that require urgent medical or surgical attention. Echocardiography remains the cornerstone for assessing vegetations. By providing real-time images of the valves, it allows us to evaluate the size, mobility, and attachment of vegetations, which are key to risk stratification. Further echocardiographic assessment helps us understand the hemodynamic impact of the infection. We monitor for signs of valvular regurgitation and other functional disturbances that may necessitate surgical intervention. Typical findings in endocarditis often include oscillating masses on valve leaflets, known as vegetations. Recognizing these features on echocardiography is fundamental to confirm the diagnosis and assess patient prognosis. When defining a vegetation, clinicians look for specific echocardiographic characteristics. Size and mobility are critical factors. As larger, mobile vegetations are often associated with a higher risk of embolic events. Vegetations typically attach to the atrial side of atrioventricular valves or the ventricular side of semilunar valves. Understanding these common sites of attachment assists in the accurate interpretation of echocardiographic images. It is important to differentiate true vegetations from other masses, such as non-bacterial thrombotic endocarditis, tumors, or thrombi. Careful analysis of clinical history and imaging characteristics is required for an accurate differential diagnosis. In native aortic valve endocarditis, vegetations can lead to severe regurgitation. Early identification through imaging is essential to manage potential heart failure and prevent further hemodynamic deterioration. Mitral valve involvement often presents with unique imaging findings. Our assessment focuses on the leaflet anatomy, potential for perforation, and the presence of complex regurgitant jets resulting from the infection. Prosthetic valve infections present specific challenges, including periannular dehiscence. Imaging must be precise to evaluate the stability of the prosthesis and the extent of the infection involving the surrounding annulus. Periannular extension, such as the formation of a false aneurysm, signifies a severe and complex infection. These cases often require a collaborative approach involving cardiology and cardiothoracic surgery for effective management.
MCQ1 is here now. Are you ready? A 55-year-old male with a prosthetic aortic valve is diagnosed with infective endocarditis. Blood cultures grow Streptococcus gallolyticus, formerly Streptococcus bovis. What is the most appropriate next diagnostic step for this patient? A. Transthoracic echocardiogram, TTE. B. Colonoscopy. C. Urgent aortic valve replacement surgery. D. CT angiogram of the brain. Answer: B. Colonoscopy. Explanation: Streptococcus gallolyticus, S. bovis, bacteremia and endocarditis have a notoriously strong, proven correlation with underlying gastrointestinal malignancies, specifically colorectal carcinoma, as well as adenomatous polyps. Finding this organism on blood cultures mandates a complete evaluation of the colon, even in the absence of GI symptoms. MCQ 2. A patient presenting with prolonged fever and a heart murmur undergoes an echocardiogram, which reveals a 1.2 centimeter mobile vegetation on the mitral valve. Which of the following peripheral manifestations of infective endocarditis is correctly paired with its underlying pathophysiological mechanism? A. Janeway lesions, IgA immune complex deposition. B. Osler nodes, septic microembolization. C. Splinter hemorrhages, type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. D. Osler nodes, immune complex mediated vasculitis. Answer: D. Osler nodes, immune complex mediated vasculitis. Explanation: Osler nodes are painful, tender nodules found on the pads of the fingers and toes caused by local immune complex deposition, vasculitis. Conversely, Janeway lesions are painless erythematous macules on the palms and soles caused by septic microemboli. Remembering Osler equals ouch helps differentiate the painful immunologic node from the painless embolic Janeway lesion. MCQ number 3. According to the modified Duke criteria for diagnosing infective endocarditis, which of the following scenarios fulfills the requirements for a definite clinical diagnosis? A. 1 major criterion and 2 minor criteria. B. 2 major criteria. C. 3 minor criteria. D. 1 major criterion and 1 minor criterion. Answer: B. 2 major criteria. Explanation: To secure a definite clinical diagnosis using the modified Duke criteria, a patient must meet either 2 major criteria, 1 major plus 3 minor criteria, or 5 minor criteria. Major criteria primarily include positive blood cultures for typical organisms, drawn from persistent, separate sets, and echocardiographic evidence of endocardial involvement, like a mobile vegetation, abscess, or new valvular regurgitation. This video outlines the medical guidelines for managing infective endocarditis, beginning with empiric antibiotic recommendations for native valve endocarditis. For community-acquired cases, standard protocols suggest combinations including ampicillin, ceftriaxone, or flucloxacillin and gentamicin, with specific dosages tailored for both adults and pediatric patients.
When dealing with prosthetic valve endocarditis, or PVE, treatment strategies shift. For early onset or healthcare-associated infections, recommendations include vancomycin or daptomycin, typically combined with gentamicin and rifampin. Dosing guidelines for both adult and pediatric populations are provided. For patients with documented beta-lactam allergies, treatment pathways are adjusted. In cases of community-acquired NVE or late PVE, alternatives such as cefazolin, vancomycin, and gentamicin may be considered, following specific weight-based dosing for children and fixed dosing for adults. This flowchart details the decision-making process for switching patients from intravenous to oral antibiotic treatment. Key factors include infection control status, absence of complications, and suitability assessments to ensure patient safety before transitioning. The POET trial investigated the safety of oral versus intravenous therapy. Findings suggested that in stable patients, completing treatment with oral antibiotics was non-inferior to continued intravenous administration regarding the primary composite outcome of mortality, surgery, or embolic events. 5-year follow-up data from the POET trial further explored long-term outcomes. While results remain encouraging, clinical practice requires caution. Standard durations for therapy often range up to 6 weeks, particularly for resistant pathogens or complex cases. Outpatient treatment can be considered for clinically stable patients with left-sided endocarditis caused by common pathogens. However, this is not recommended for patients with complex conditions, such as liver cirrhosis, severe emboli, or those needing surgical interventions. Surgery plays a vital role in treating infective endocarditis. Up to 50% of contemporary patients may require surgical consultation to manage complications or prevent further damage, as medical therapy alone is often insufficient for severe cases. The timing of surgery is critical. This schematic guides surgical decisions based on heart failure, uncontrolled infection, or embolic risk. Each scenario is classified by the necessity for emergency, urgent, or non-urgent intervention. Early surgical intervention has been compared to conventional treatment in clinical studies. Results indicated that patients undergoing early surgery experienced significantly fewer embolic events and improved composite clinical outcomes compared to those treated with prolonged conventional therapy. Managing infective endocarditis in patients who have suffered a stroke requires a multidisciplinary approach. Neurological assessment is essential to determine the feasibility of surgery, balancing the risks of bleeding and the severity of heart failure. For CIED-related endocarditis, diagnosis involves blood cultures and advanced imaging. The treatment pathway emphasizes device extraction and appropriate antibiotic therapy duration, determined by the presence of vegetation and the specific pathogen identified. Surgery for right-sided endocarditis is specifically recommended in scenarios such as severe tricuspid regurgitation, respiratory insufficiency due to recurrent emboli, or simultaneous involvement of left-sided heart structures. Complications of infective endocarditis are broad, categorized into structural, hemodynamic, and systemic issues. Early recognition of symptoms like dyspnea is crucial, as heart failure remains a primary driver of morbidity and a frequent indication for surgery. Finally, understanding recurrent endocarditis is essential. By comparing isolates and timing, clinicians distinguish between a relapse of the initial infection or a new reinfection, which helps guide the ongoing management strategy for the patient.
Thank you for watching this video on the management of infective endocarditis. We hope this overview of diagnostic and treatment protocols has been informative for your clinical practice.